Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast, all in on love, loss, and connection. Today, I'm taping with my friend Corey. Corey had Ginny and I on his show a few months ago, and it was awesome. So we wanted to invite Corey back. You want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll jump into our conversation?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast today. My name is Corey Hennings. I do host my own podcast, the Sober by Design podcast. I always like to introduce myself as somebody in long-term recovery, a husband, father, friend, brother, coach. I have a lot of hats in my personal life that I wear. But when I find myself on podcasts, I tend to speak mostly on recovery and mental health. That's been my groove for the past year. Just kind of talking on my own podcast and then jumping on others.
So important. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing, especially a man talking about mental health. We don't hear that or see that so much. I have another friend, Patrick, which you guys should probably connect. He hosts the Let's Talk with Patrick podcast. And his whole mission is to make mental health a more accessible, vulnerable conversation where men can feel comfortable talking about this kind of stuff. Because I don't know, but in Colorado, I heard that we have one of the highest levels of middle-aged men committing suicide.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a big deal.
it is a big deal. And, I think I was just talking to my father about this yesterday, that I think there's just sort of still this thing wrapped up in, masculinity or what people perceive as masculinity, and then being able to be vulnerable and talk about mental health or challenges and, conversations around weakness. And just, I think all the thoughts on it are still very, I don't know how many years old, but they're too old and they're too based in something that's not where we are in 2024.
Exactly. And it's no surprise to me that you talk about sobriety and mental health, because a lot of people think addiction is just a matter of willpower, right?
Right.
Like, why can't you just stop? And what we know, what science has proved, is that it is a disease. It's a disease of the brain. Many of us are born with, I think, 40% less dopamine than, I don't know, normies is what sometimes people who don't have an addiction are called. I don't like that term, because what is normal, right? But they go hand in hand, is what I'm trying to say. Addiction and mental illness go hand in hand. And yes, addiction in and of itself is a mental illness classified by the DSM-5 because it centers in our mind. But, the comorbidity with depression and anxiety and bipolar, the numbers that we see of people that suffer from those secondary illnesses, coupled with addiction. I've seen just in my history of being sober, sponsoring women and stuff, the ones that have the hardest time staying sober with like longevity are the ones that really suffer with another mental illness.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, from my journey, I probably started in my first attempt at therapy was probably in my early 20s. I had been drinking by that point already, but I definitely suffered and still do from some sort of compulsive disorder. It was really bad at that point. I was a neat freak. My wife will tell you that I still am, right? If there's anything missing in the house, I'm the person that threw it away. I've gotten much better over time, but there was a point where it was probably becoming unmanageable. And that was like my first thought about going into therapy. And then kind of stepped away from it, got a little bit of control over that portion of my life, and then found myself back in therapy with my wife, actually couples therapy. And that process led me to recovery. Just being in couples therapy, understanding that things that were going wrong, even though I was blaming them on other things, all roads led back to alcohol. I was just talking to somebody about this, but I could only explain away things so much before like the story got back to alcohol, every time. And like, it was just kind of like beating my head against it, right? Like I just kept looking for the other excuse. But at the same point, I think in therapy, just understanding maybe where some of my underlying trauma came from, and other other things that were going on in my head was super helpful, right? So like stopping drinking was the first part. And then since then, it's been a 12-year journey of figuring out what else is going on, you know? But it like freed me up to do that stuff, right? Like the drinking
Yeah.
was just stopping me from doing that. Now I can focus on like, okay, what else can I fix here through therapy or, all sorts of things. So,
100%. The alcohol, drugs, whatever it is that we're addicted to, even other addictions, shopping and sex and gambling and all that is covering up the root cause, right? We call it a spiritual malady in some circles. And there's something going on. There's this hole in the soul that we're trying to fill with other stuff. And when we do an effective job of filling it, because addiction works well until it doesn't, once that's gone, then all the stuff just comes up.
yeah.
It just comes up and it comes out. Like we can't not see it.
Yeah, I know it was hard for me at the start. I was trying to think back before I jumped on here. I started drinking when I was 18. I
How-
remember when I was about 35. And so it was a long stretch of just covering up stuff that was probably wanting to come out in other ways. And again, I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't opening up. And I was just kind of covering it up and doing so, sometimes publicly, sometimes very much on my own in my house, just drinking by myself late at night after people went to bed. And then once I had, I don't know, a couple months of sobriety, 6 months of sobriety, I started to open up and talk more about my recovery and then talk more about sort of the underlying issues that I was dealing with in my life with my therapist. And that journey has continued on.
Yeah. So what were those early years like for you? Your early years of recovery?
Yeah,
Let's hear our story.
my early years of recovery. So it's been, like I said, it's been about 12 years and I've definitely gone through phases. But early on, one thing that I will say was, for me, there was a lot of contemplation before I actually got sober. I probably had 3 to 6 misstarts in AA. I was very hesitant to stop drinking and get into the recovery space. For me, one, I really thought that alcohol was part of who I was. I didn't see it as an issue because I did not have those outward moments of real trouble. I didn't lose a job because of drinking. I never got in an accident. There was no police trouble. Um, there were issues around my relationships, but again, I was explaining them away via other things. It was never alcohol that was the issue. It was some other thing. So for me, recovery was not something that I was like fully thinking about. My mother, who was in recovery, I saw her recovery journey, and it was I always looked at it as something that was not 100% good for her. Like she really dove headfirst into AA. And it was, to me, from what I saw from the outside, it was almost as if AA was as bad as the drinking, right? Like,
Oh,
it almost felt like she had an addiction to AA or that,
yeah.
that whole religious AA, like the whole thing. It was all wrapped up in something. And I lost her to that world. And I would often think, what was worse, right? So this was something that she found recovery when I was 18. I started drinking when I was 18. So there was a lot of overlap during that time. And so I had a lot of ill feelings towards the whole recovery world for a long time. Um, so anyway, I had about 3 to 6 missteps, and they weren't long. They would be a month maybe. And then in 2012, I had a night, just drank way too much. It actually wasn't even night, it was an afternoon. And I knew it was like the last moment I could drink before I lost my family. The next morning I woke up, went to an AA meeting at a local church by my work. It was actually a lunchtime meeting. There was a room full of senior citizens and myself. And I sat down and I just went and I don't even think I talked, but I enjoyed that moment because I just felt so bad. There was like so much shame in me at that time. Like I knew the day before I did something really not. It wasn't bad. Like, again, not hourly bad, but it was like a shameful moment. I went home that night. I think my wife, she could probably remind me or check me on it. I don't know if she talked to me, but I let her know that I went to a meeting. I don't think she cared. And that kind of process continued on for a couple weeks. Part of me probably thought like, well, I'm going to come home and be a hero. Like now I've stopped
Mm.
drinking and this is all fixed. And, but it was weeks before there was like any sort of like normalcy. And then I would say months before it was like, felt like I had made some sort of progress in my relationship at home. Personally, though, I was feeling much better. I was going to these meetings. I was interfacing with, again, people much older than me, but they had a lot to offer. I could see that they were living okay lives, that my life wouldn't fall apart if I stopped drinking, that there was
Mhm.
something else. And for me, that was the big thing, right? My identity was wrapped up in this idea that I was a drinker and I didn't want to let go of that. But then I was seeing, people in their 60s, 70s that had tons of time and they had these other identities and they were living their lives in some other way that was meaningful. It just kind of gave me something to shoot for, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Did you like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's like they always say, like, find the person that has the thing you want, right? And it wasn't like I didn't want like a car, right? There was like a guy with a Corvette or something. It was just like I just wanted the life. They had, grandkids and they were going on trips or whatever it was. There was something about their sort of relationship with their family and themselves that was appealing. It wasn't the things that they acquired. Um,
Yeah.
so
I hear you completely. One of my, I guess it was my third meeting. I was at, it was a Friday night and it was they were celebrating an anniversary. And I remember I walked into this room. There were a lot of people there and a lot of people's families. And they had vases of flowers on the table and balloons, like a cake. There were little kids running around. And I was like, I was expecting, it was my third meeting. I didn't know anything. And I was expecting it to just doom and gloom, right? It wasn't like that at all. What you're talking about brought me right back to that moment because it was not the stuff, of course. It was the feeling. It was the feeling. These people were happy. They were laughing, right? The kids were safe. They were in this room of all these people, and you just knew, I knew I was safe here. Nobody was looking to hurt me. I mean, listen, not everybody in the program is a stellar human being. However, there was something very attractive, right? We say attraction, not promotion.
mhm.
And that to me was very, very attractive. I wanted what those people had. And really, it was just happiness because I was just at the bottom. And really, there was nowhere to go but up. But yeah, reminiscing on those early years is so important too, to keep it green, right? To
Yeah,
keep it right here.
yeah,
Forget.
yeah. And at that point, I was willing to do a lot to maintain that. There was a lot of choices that I made in early sobriety that somebody might look at now and say, "Well, that wasn't smart," or that wasn't something that you should do. But like, I would eat candy at lunch. Like that was my lunch. When I put on 30 pounds, again, like my lunch breaks were meetings. That's how I lived. It was everything I could do to just get to the next day at that point. Uh, I also at that point in my life made a little bit of a career change, like probably step back. I actually like took a job that was probably a little less than I should have at the time, but it was tied into again my mental health. I could see like, okay, if I stay where I'm at, like this could be a little bit against where I'm trying to head long term for who I am. So I really try to look at everything holistically at that point. I think I stayed in the meetings for about a year and a half. Can't remember the exact duration. And then at some point I looked up and thought, there's probably got to be a different way for me. I wasn't getting that same thing anymore. I love the community of it, but then there was also a moment where some people started to be a little bit pushy and say like I wasn't doing it their way and I was going to like lose my sobriety because it wasn't their way. That started to feel a little bit off. Uh, and like you just said, not everybody in these programs is like Like they're not trained professionals. They're not,
Yeah.
they are just people.
Yes.
Um, and for me, I thought, okay, well, I could probably find some other thing. At that point, I was coaching kids soccer, so there was like a built-in community around me. I think at that time, podcasts were sort of, well, 2012, 13, podcasts were still kind of new-ish, or they were just coming around. So there was a lot of podcasts popping up, and there were some good ones in the recovery space. The Home podcast was one that I found early on and listened to those two women speak, and there was a couple others since right now. And, so I found this online group, and then Instagram. There was a big sobriety Instagram community. So, I started to find other modalities. Kind of at that point in my recovery, and for me it worked. Is it for everybody? No, there's not like a single path that works for everybody, right? Like some
No.
people need rehab, some people can do an IOP, some people can just stop, and I'm not sitting here to judge any choice. I guess part of me is thinking, well, if I'm not going to judge somebody, like how can I have 4 or 5 different individuals judging me and my choices that I'm making, right? There was just a lot of what it felt at that moment, what I was feeling, Amanda, was like, these people want me to do exactly what my mom did and just like live in AA, right? Like it just felt like that moment. I guess I started to think is this what she felt? And did
Hmm.
the scales tip? And at that point, I could have asked her, but I didn't,
Yeah.
right? Like I would go to meetings with her too. Like at that point she knew, and I would go to some meetings with her. And so there was a little bit of an overlap there where we would show up to some meetings together, which was nice. But that definitely was her world more than mine. And and since then I've kind of evolved in how I treat my recovery. Again, I still have a very strong online community. I became involved in my local recovery center, which is not a 12-step meeting, but like we get together, there's events. Like it's a lot of those same components that I really hold dear in my recovery, which is like, community, being of service. Those are the two that I can really get in other places now. And it's just
Yeah.
what's kept me going.
That's great. I mean, yeah, different strokes for different folks. I really feel the same way. It's worked for me for a long time, but doesn't mean that it's for everybody. Love and service is really what was drilled into me when I was, still living in New York. There was this guy that he was like a circuit speaker kind of dude. And his thing, he was Irish. He had this bro. He was saying, love and service, always love and service, love and service. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And you can do that anywhere. You don't have to be in Alcoholics Anonymous or a
Right.
12-step program. If you're practicing the principles of it, and you're getting those needs met, then who is anybody to say what you're supposed to be doing, And if anybody's going to judge you that's in AA, then I'll say it straight up, they need to check their program. Maybe I'll judge them because that's not what we do here. That's just not how it works at all. Again, attraction, not promotion type
Yeah.
deal. Oh, you got to do this or else you're going to, there are some things. I actually just had a hard conversation with somebody, sponsee recently about, she was still smoking pot
Mm.
and she did have a relapse. And at the beginning, I was like, yeah, whatever. If it's working for her, whatever, who am I to say anything? And then when she relapsed, I said, I'm doing you a disservice by allowing you to do this because I do not want to show up at your funeral and feel like I should have told you what was truly in my heart. And what's truly in my heart is no mind altering substances.
Yeah.
That's how I work my program. But, I'm in Colorado. And, weed is becoming like a big thing everywhere. And there's all these studies coming out too about like how like these late teens, early 20s, especially boys, men are having schizophrenic episodes, like stuff that's in the weed now. People think it's legal so that it's okay, it's safe. It's not. And I don't want to be sort of a part of anybody else's death. I still love her. We're still friends. I just can't take you through the step work that way.
Yeah.
So there's just a couple of like hard and fast things that I hold to, but I don't judge her for it. That's what she needs to not drink, and that's what she needs to not drink. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who will take her through the program.
Yeah, and for her that could be harm reduction, right? Like,
Exactly. That's what I said to her. Yes, it's harm reduction.
yeah, and that's fine. And again, not my journey. And I would actively support it, but maybe I can't help her, right? Like, and that's fine,
Yes.
you know?
And both can exist. Both can exist. I don't have to say I can't work with you and that's wrong, right?
Right.
I could say for
For
me
me,
in my own sobriety, I can't do that. And for how I want to live my life, but that's good for you. That's fine for
for you.
you. Right? Like we can find this like middle ground where we don't have to be all or nothing. And that again is a theme of sobriety, having that not black and white thinking, finding that gray area.
Yeah, maybe I'm just gonna say maybe 15 years ago, somebody just would in a room would just be so against it, right? Like there was no room for that. And I think it's very similar now to like again, men talking about mental health. Like there's a little bit more flexibility in how we see recovery, right? Like harm reduction is a topic that we talk about, and it is something that is like a real thing. What is the best way for you to start to live a better life? I guess is kind of what I'm always thinking about. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, listen, I'm a huge believer in the 12 steps. I think everybody should kind of go through and learn them. I think they're just great ways to live. I think that there's just some foundational things in any 12-step group that can help somebody in recovery or just somebody like living as a human on planet Earth. Like I think they're just great things, right? So my time there was well spent. And I refer people there if I'm working with somebody who I'm a recovery coach for, and I think it's the right destination for them. I will 100% send them. But then there's some people that I just know it's not the right destination for, in our conversations. And like I might send them to a SMART meeting, or I might say, listen, IOP, or you really need rehab. Like there's just so much, right? Noble steps or refuge recovery, or hey, you can just get away with reading books maybe for a while and let's see where that goes. I try to be very aware of the person
Yes.
and who they are, because like just trying to shove people into like the same thing, I don't think that's the way to go anymore,
No,
you know?
not at all. I had a sponsor here when I first moved to Colorado who just kind of did the same thing across the board with everybody that she worked with.
Mhm.
And it didn't work for me. And that was the first relationship in the program that I ended. And ended kind of not well, which really disturbed me. But I don't do that with the women that I work with. Everybody's different. There are some basic things that, yes, if you're in this program and you want to go through the steps, there are some things that are, we say suggested, but kind of required, right? Like you have to do step one, but how you do it could look different from how I do it, you know? Or I believe you have to go to meetings if you're going to be like in this program. That's pretty much a part of it. Doesn't mean that you have to go to the same meetings I go to, or you can go some on Zoom, some in person. Like it doesn't have to look how my recovery looks, but there's certain basic fundamentals that need to be in place that I firmly believe are going to help. And hey, you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. It's
Yeah.
not my job. It's not my business. I'm just a messenger. It's not my job to keep you sober. I'm still sober and I'm not, I'm not losing sleep at night. Like, yes, I care about you, but ultimately this is your recovery. I'm just a messenger. That's it. You do with the information what you will.
Yeah, and a lot of times you're working with people in that early recovery and they think they got it soon, and like soon after, I don't worry, I got this. And you know, again, and I kind of probably had some of that early on as well. It's just, again, I think meeting people where they are and understanding what they can give is important, because you can really, again, like I had somebody just say like, what did they say? I was having a party at my house. It was for my wife and myself. We were celebrating a wedding anniversary. So I had a bunch of people over, and I at that time and still feel like it's not my job to police other people's drinking, right? Like, so if I have a party at my house, I have alcohol, and that's been the way it's been since the start. And this was a guy, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna fail, right? Like, how can you be having fun like that?" And I thought, and in my head, there was like a little thought that started, and it's like, wait, I'm not supposed to have fun? Like, I got sober, I'm getting my family back, and I'm not supposed to have fun. There's a disconnect here, right? Like, I almost lost my family because I was drinking. I stopped drinking. Now I have my family back. We're having this celebration of our anniversary. All our friends around us, and I'm not supposed to have fun.
Mhm.
So it was just like a weird moment in my head. Uh, and
Yeah,
that,
that sounds like a controlling thing, like
yeah,
that's your decision, what you want to do. If you did happen to spiral down and relapse because of that, maybe you needed to,
maybe.
right? Also, who am I to hold somebody from a relapse? Who am I? I hope you don't. I hope you don't die, and I hope you make it back. And I might spend a few minutes trying to talk you into coming to a meeting with me if I see you spiraling down. But ultimately, it's not up to me to save you.
Yeah,
That's something you have to do for yourself. And that means you get to make the decisions for wherever your soul is going to go. I believe we have these soul paths. I believe that I cannot interfere with yours, that yours is you're going to end up wherever you need to end up for your lessons. And who am I to say what that should look like?
right.
Right. So again, humility is a huge part. One of the, I think it's the main principle of this program underneath every step. I have to practice that across the board. And I got to check in with myself when I think I know what's right for you.
Yeah,
I have to check in and say, wait a minute, no, I don't. You know, but then again, balanced with that, there's certain things that I'm comfortable with and that I'm not comfortable with. And so it's hard, but I guess if I just kind of keep operating with, a few important principles to me, then that should pretty much be my roadmap,
yeah,
for how to handle my sobriety and try to help others.
yeah. And that's like my early-ish sobriety, up until about say 2017-ish. That's
Mhm.
how I did everything. And I think we talked about this a little bit when I had you on my podcast. In 2017, my mom passed.
Yes.
So my mom took her own life. I tell this story and I always kind of tell it differently. Um, and I always say it's okay. It's my story to tell. I became her executor, so I'm her legally now. Um,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
so my mom had me when she was 18. My dad was older. They were divorced early. My mom probably was a drinker early on, right? Like that was who she was. She was drugs, alcohol, like that was her thing. She would get it together for good stints. She was a dental hygienist, and but then I definitely did see her drink heavily. I would say from the time I was in sixth grade through high school. It was like an escalating thing. Um, and then she found recovery. Through that time, there was a lot of good moments. And then there were some challenging moments. She had had two other children, with my stepfather. My one brother, had some health challenges through life. Also, I think struggled a little bit with, well, no, he did struggle with substances. I'm not correlating the two in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just trying to lay out that like she did not live an easy life. Um, and when something like that happens, when somebody takes their life, a lot of people try to point to one of these moments, right? They might point to, well, she had a kid when she was 18, or she, struggled with drugs and alcohol, or she had a sick child, or she got divorced twice. There's all these things that people want to point to one moment in time. And what I've come to find out in just kind of going through the story so many times in my head, it's like, it's a culmination of all of it. She did not have good mental health. She did go to therapy. I don't know how rigorous she was about it. I don't know how truthful she was about it because it's not my thing, right? That was her journey.
Mhm.
But I could see it devolving like the last year of her life. I definitely saw it all sort of spiraling, and I reached out. I would reach out to friends of hers, just tried to figure some way to get to her. I kind of knew it was coming. And then it came, and it just, since then, I am a firm believer that anything can happen to me, right? Like it definitely reset who I am as a person. So since November 2017, I am just everything is possible now. Like I don't discount anything bad happening. I'd say I'm more hypervigilant than ever. I was a hypervigilant person to begin with. Now I'm probably 10 times worse. I saw this type of death like rip through my family, extended family. It changed the dynamic. I don't know if I mentioned it when we were talking about it, but like, I think people treat me differently. Some people don't really want to be around me. Maybe I remind them of her too much. I don't know. Maybe that's just me thinking that. It's a big event, and it happens a lot. Since then, people have told me, of their loved ones dying this way online. There's a bit of a community around it. It's a devastating type of loss. Affected my children. It affected my wife. It affected me. So when that happened, I definitely dove more into like my recovery coaching. I really started to take mental health like super seriously. If I see somebody struggling, I am probably there more so than I should be, but you don't know. And nobody on the outside knew that my mom was this way. It was shocking to everybody else. That's the thing. Like, she was very active in the community. She had a job at the local church. She was youth minister. Like, it was shocking to people. They did not see this as a possibility. To think that like I know everybody that's, on this path would be crazy, because if I didn't know my mom as my mom, I don't think I would have seen this as a possibility for her. Yeah.
Would you say you're traumatized from
Me?
that?
Am I traumatized? Sure. Yeah. How I handle it, I don't know.
Have you done any sort of specific therapy for
Yeah.
that trauma?
Like very early on, like right after it happened, I'd say 2 months, we went to a local grief center for myself, my wife, and my children. My older son was 7th grade. My younger son was like 6 at the time. Didn't really hit him the same way that it hit my older son. For better or worse, we were very open with what happened. I did not hide it. I don't think there's any value in hiding something like that.
I agree.
How that's kind of spiraled out is tricky, right? Like, one, like to lose your grandma as a 7th grader when she was 58 and like young and vibrant, on the surface, that's hard. And then to understand how it happened is like, I can't make heads or tails of it. Yeah. So we did that early on as a family. I have a counselor who is very focused on grief, and I've continued on with her since. At this point, I am probably doing therapy once a month. Through there, I've also done tapping.
EFT tapping?
Yeah, EFT tapping.
I've done that. Yeah.
I also did like a hypnotherapy thing, which kind of helped.
Was it rapid resolution therapy by any chance, or RT?
No, it was just like a hypnosis type.
A regular hypnosis.
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of came out of the tapping person. We kind of ran the course, and then that was the next logical step.
Okay.
So, I continue on in it. That was 2017, and then things got a little wonky in like 2019 with COVID. And then in the midst of COVID, my brother passed. I know we talked about that. So my brother, the one who was, had some health challenges and definitely substance abuse issues. He passed during the point in COVID when you weren't allowed to go to the hospital. I don't know if people remember that specifically, but it was tricky to get in and out of hospitals. And he died in a palliative care unit. He decided to just stop his treatments. And again, a very traumatic type event. We actually thought we were going to get him home, but because of challenges with the supply chain during the time of COVID, we couldn't get a certain medical device, and timing didn't work, and he ended up passing in the hospital. I was able to see him. We were all able to see him other than my older son. And it just, again, was like another sort of gut punch to the family. Just something that, again, I saw coming, but you could see these things coming, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, listen, you see everybody dying, right? Like, literally, that's the end game of
everybody's going to die.
Yeah. Like, you all see it coming. It doesn't matter. I don't know if it does matter. I think it does matter to some extent how this happens, right? Like, there are different types of death, and I can say they're all not built the same. My great grandma dying at like 102 in her sleep is much different than my mom passing from suicide at 58, is much different than a 12-year-old being, murdered, right? Like, they're all very different experiences.
Yeah.
And, my brother dying at 30 was tricky because he died at 30, and his life that he lived for a good portion of it was not great, right? He was in the ICU, he was in rehabs, and like, so we all kind of watched this very slow progression, right? We knew the outcome, right? But it was like, what was that going to look like for the years leading up to it? And I think that was a challenge for myself, my mom, my stepfather, my other brother, and friends and family. Just like watching it happen, and then just knowing like the end game, right? Like there were moments, I think, early on where there was some hope around it, and then there was a point where it was like he's going to end his life earlier than he should, and that was just it was tough to watch. So those two deaths close to each other were definitely a challenge. I didn't feel the need to like drink, which was quite good. Kind of was like, oh, okay, I got this sobriety thing. Like whatever I've been doing works.
Yes, working. Can I ask, did your brother pass from an overdose or substances, or
No,
I forget. I
no.
think you told me on your show, but I don't remember.
Yeah, no, he didn't. Again, he had challenges with different substances over the course of his life. He definitely enjoyed partying, and he enjoyed like the music festival scene, and he lived a certain way, and he started that life very early on. He was young when he started it, and he had childhood diabetes. You start to couple a disease like that with somebody who maybe isn't always fully mentally aware, who's not taking care of their health, complications arise quickly. And he definitely had some complications from diabetes. He loved smoking pot. I personally think that he had some health impacts from it. Some of the symptoms he had definitely come from smoking too much pot at a young age. There was a lot of throwing up, and but like it got very difficult to diagnose what was what at a certain point. His actual cause of death ended up being kidney failure, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Like he was at a point where his kidneys were out, and dialysis was like all that was keeping him going. So he had to make a choice. These were all things that kind of tumbled out of just, again, health, how he treated substances.
Yeah.
You can only do so much as somebody on the outside, right? Like there was only so much I could do for my mom to try to say, hey, this is what you should be doing, right? Like I remember there were times when my mom would come over and she hadn't slept, burning the candle on all ends. Her diet was poor. Like I could see her failing. And I'd say like, why don't you eat something? Why don't you, like, why don't you just sleep at our house? She would just keep going, right? Like, but I can't, I as a person can only suggest these things. I can't do them for somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing sometimes. I've always thought about going to like Al-Anon or, like codependence or something like that.
I go to ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Sometimes it's ACOA, kind of depends on where you live. That's probably what it is by you. I think
it
in
is.
New York,
It is.
ACOA.
Yep.
And I found that when I was 13 years sober, and I was at another bottom. Yeah. My brother had died a year and a half before that, and I found this program by accident, actually. I thought I was going to an AA meeting. They have something called a laundry list. It's 14 traits of an adult child. And my parents were an alcoholic. And I'm really glad that they added in that end dysfunctional family part at the end, because I'd say probably 99% of the people, if not 100% of the people in recovery, have dysfunctional families. Total game changer. Really kind of got to the heart, the core of my pain, of my childhood wounds, of stuff that had happened throughout my life that just compounded and compounded. And then when my brother died, I just couldn't keep it in anymore. I didn't even know this stuff was going on under the surface. And then I was in therapy and that coupled. So yeah, ACA was a really good, like just game changer, like saved my marriage. I'm just a totally different person because of it. Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life from, killing myself with drugs and alcohol. But ACA has given me a life, the life beyond my wildest dreams, in terms of being comfortable in my own skin. I would have never been able to do something like this or write a book without healing the shame, the guilt, just the stuff that I carried. Just that a lot of us carry from childhood, just for the lack of our parents not knowing how to do it any differently. I kind of chalk it up to that. I don't blame anybody. I think parenting styles were very different when we were kids than how we're parenting. We just know more. We know the effects of some of the the mentality and the narratives that would just accept it as normal. Hate your kids, do whatever, whatever it is that was accepted as normal. But yeah, sorry, I got a little tangential there, but
No.
ACA is very, very important. And I think people need to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know about it. I had a friend who went. I have not gone. I've thought about going. We have, I think, because I recommended it actually to somebody I'm working with. But trying to find a local meeting around here, you'd be surprised. It's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, there's not many here either. It hasn't taken off like AA because it's a very difficult, emotionally grueling process.
Yeah.
There is so much freedom on the other side, just like doing the steps, but it's almost like a fourth step type of deal on like steroids. I never recommend it to anybody who's new. I think you have to at least go through all the steps in another program. You have to have some kind of personal development under your belt. You have to have some kind of awareness and some kind of ability to withstand pain, really, and not run away. And plenty of people do run away. We started a step study once with like 12 people, ended up with like 3. It's not for the faint of heart, but what's on the other side waiting for you is so worth it.
Yeah. I think it's hard to talk about your parents in a way that's like, maybe, and I don't know this to be a fact, but like to say like, hey, my parents weren't perfect. It's a tricky thing.
Just like I'm not perfect. I know my kids. Listen, I'm trying to do it a lot differently, but like I know my kids are going to end up on somebody's couch someday complaining about me, because in 20, 30 years from now, it's all the stuff we think now, right? It's going to be built upon. There's going to be so much more studies and evidence and treatments and just new ways of thinking that it's just not accessible to us right now with where we are in society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just try to do it better than the one before. And I know our parents tried to do it better than their parents,
Yeah. Yeah. I think for the most part that's a true statement. Yeah. It's hard. There's like a generational trauma thing. It's passed from, generation to generation. I always say that at least we're trying in our house to make it better. Like my wife and myself, we are both trying.
Yeah.
We met each other when we were young. And then as we went through like couple counseling, I think we realized like, whoa, neither one of us had great modeling for this relationship thing. And then as we became parents, I think we realized very soon, like, oh, we didn't have great models for this either. And like, that's really where you're learning all this as a person. You're learning it from the people that you're living with to some extent, right?
Totally.
And if it's not a great model, that's what, they're not teaching you how to be a couple at school. They're teaching you math and reading. They're not teaching you about a relationship with somebody else. They're definitely not teaching you how to be a parent. You might see versions of it as a child somewhere else, but as a child, when you see a better version, you don't go like, hey, that's what I'm going to be. It's like, hey, that's what I don't have.
Yes. It almost seems foreign. I remember seeing that. I remember exactly what you're talking about. There are certain instances in my life that I can remember with certain friends and their parents, or the way their parents interacted with each other, that caught my attention.
Right.
And I was like, what is that? Like, I don't know that. I don't feel that. I was envious of it. I knew that I kind of wanted that, but I just didn't know what it was or how to get it.
Right. And
how would we if it's not modeled, like you said?
Right. Yeah. And that's all it is. And then like, as you get better as a couple, I've had people in our community, like friends, say like, hey, you guys are so good. It's like, yeah, because we work at being a couple, right? We work on it. It's not like we're not just so madly in love that everything's perfect. We still have nasty fights. There's still days where like we go to bed and I'll say goodnight, but we don't really say, that's just the way it is. But
I just had one last night.
Yeah.
Just had one nice, big, fun blowout last night.
How to recover.
And then we talked, right? We talked through it again this morning. We woke up. How are you? I checking in. How are you feeling? Are you emotionally hungover? Let's, yeah. And then it passes. It doesn't last. It's not like we're not talking to each other for like a week, or giving each other silent treatment, or banging things around in the house. Like, that's unacceptable to us. We have to handle what's going on with us, because we know how it's going to affect our kids, how it's going to affect us. I don't want to feel that way.
Right.
I care too much about myself today to sacrifice time where I feel good.
But it takes work.
It wasn't said very eloquently, but I think you know what I
Perfectly fine. And it takes work. I think that's the thing that everybody has to understand. Like none of this is just gonna happen. Like I always equate my therapy to the gym. Like, and this is the same with like my relationship stuff too. Like I can go to the gym and say I go to the gym and do nothing, right? Like and just go. And somebody would go like, Corey, you tell me you go to the gym like every day, but you're totally out of shape. Like yeah, well, I just go to the gym. I don't actually do
Yeah.
anything. I just stand there, right? Like, so I could say I go to therapy, but like not do any of the work and then just be the same person, 3 years later. And I think that that's the difference. If you're going to spend time in therapy, like you need to listen, you need to be honest, you need to go and try the things that are told to you. And it might not work, it might work, then you go back and you have a further discussion. But like just going isn't enough. You need to put the things into action and see what happens.
Totally. She gave us when Jim and I were in marriage counseling, we were in for like a year and a half with in the space, and then COVID hit and he didn't want to do the Zoom. I don't blame him. I don't love Zoom therapy. And we did something different together. We did something called the Mago therapy, and we did this workbook together on our own for like another year during COVID. But she would give us literally handouts. Okay, this is how you're gonna have an argument. And she'd give us language to use. I don't want you to feel ... I want you to feel ... And she would say, okay, and if one person's starting to get heated, shut it down, but make a time that you're going to meet up later.
Mhm.
Right? Like she gave us all these tools, really is what they are, just tools, so that we didn't have to like make it up. It was like, okay, now we're supposed to do this, now we're supposed to do that. And so she taught us a new language, how to communicate, really is what it came down to. And it worked because we did it.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't modeled any of that as a kid. So, and neither was my wife.
Oh, wow.
That's the way that works. So, listen, I think therapy is great. I'm a big advocate. And then recognizing when you're off, I think is huge. And the more sort of in tune you get, the quicker you can realize it, and then course correct. So,
Yes, 100%. Well, we're getting kind of near the end
yeah.
here. Is there anything else you wanted to say, talk about, tell the audience?
I know that you're a big music fan. I'm a big music
Yeah.
fan. So if we'll sneak in some music stuff real quick.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, music is like a big part of my life. And I know that we had kind of talked about songs that made me think about my mom or my brother or something like that.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of like just like those songs. And I was talking to somebody about the other day, like why I like music so much. And I got to the point of like, for me, it's a way to like move through time. A song can get me back to a certain point. Like if I want to be back in my first car in high school, like I can put on this song and I can kind of grab that vibe. For me, it's very much a time traveling mechanism. So for me, like with my mom, there were two actually that popped. So one was just a song that like she really enjoyed this singer-songwriter Bob Schneider. He's out of Texas and he had a song Tokyo that she really enjoyed. So like that song particularly was one. And I had seen him in concert with her and I've seen this guy without her and but like so there were these through lines. And then just the other day I was driving in my car and a song by the Milk Carton Kids, they're a folk band, this song called Michigan. It's actually the last concert I saw with my mom and we didn't plan it. I was there with my wife and then like my mom just ended up having tickets with a friend of hers and she sat like
Cool.
the 2 rows ahead of us. It was so random.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, but like that was the last time I got to see live music with her. It was a couple months before she passed. So those were those two songs. My brother was a tougher one. He again really enjoyed the jam band scene. He really liked music. He's actually his guitar's sitting behind me, and
Oh, yeah.
he was very talented musically. The song that he I think resonated the most, and now I just kind of listen to it anytime it comes on, is Althea by the Grateful Dead. He had a dog. We named the dog Althea. Althea lives with us now. Althea is a 13-year-old black lab who is still hanging on, but like that song. But he just kind of loved that whole vibe. So those were the three songs that I thought of this week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting a lot of thought into that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and music just takes us right back. And when you were talking, I was thinking of Release Your Delf by Method Man.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
Was it, what was the name of Tikal? Is it that album?
Yeah.
Tikal? Is that
Yeah.
what it's called? My brother had that CD. And I remember being in, I don't even know how old I was when it came out, but I was probably in middle school. Sega Genesis, the video game, was popular. Jeremy had Sega in his room. And I remember sitting, he wasn't there, but I remember I would sit in his room in front of his TV and I would play Sonic the Hedgehog and I would play that Method Man CD. And I'm like, probably like 12. My parents must have been like, I think about some of the music that I listened to then, and if like my kids were listening to like Rage Against the Machine, like I would be like, the red flag would definitely go up today, right? I actually just gave my daughter all of my CDs. Right?
Okay.
And I'm sure you had the big CD book with like 100 CDs in it. You still have it?
Yeah,
Do
I
you
still have it downstairs. Yeah.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
just gave it to my daughter because CDs are coming back into fashion. I don't know if you know that.
No, I did not. I did
They
not.
sell CD players at Target, and I got one for my daughter. We checked out their CD section, just a few. She bought like Taylor Swift.
Mhm.
Like, we don't do a lot of pop in this house. I'm kind of like too cool for that, I think maybe.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm a huge Pearl Jam fan, and my daughter likes Pearl Jam too. But anyway, so I gave her all my CDs, and I was going through them. And I'm like, nope, nope, nope. You know, like she's not listening to that. But yeah, music is just so important, and it's making memories, keeping the memories, or making memories with our kids. We play we call it the Flanagan Family Band. I play the drums. My daughter plays guitar and sings. My husband plays guitar, and my youngest one, she'll be 10. She plays the piano. It's really, it's something that gets in there, that indelible mark. It just leaves that imprint on the brain. You know, it's so cool. I don't know if you've seen any videos or anything on like people with Alzheimer's or dementia. They're just completely like checked out, for lack of a better term. And they'll play music and it just lights up a part of their brain and they start like singing the words. And it's just miraculous what music does to our brains, because this video I saw, he didn't even know the name of his like family members, right? But he can sing this song from 60 years ago. It's just in there. So I'm glad that you have those memories with your mom and your brother.
Yeah, it's hard to pick out like individual songs, right? There's so many.
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that kind of rose to the top.
Well, all right, Corey. Well, thank you. This was really, really awesome. I really enjoyed my time with you. I think you're a fabulous human being, and I love the work that you're doing and your open mind, and that you just keep trudging the road, right? Trudging the road of happy destiny, like we say.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It was great to be on, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.